Yes, gosh, yes. Then it can be flogged for fortune. First edition and signed by the author.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it's all about.
It's for yourself, Helen.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Let me know if you get that. Somebody's telephone on there. We're going to open next year together, do you think?
I think we could. If you're willing to go with my time scales.
Okay.
See, it has to be the end of
Good evening, everybody. Some of you I've spoken to, some I haven't yet. It's nice to see so many interested people here tonight. Thanks to Rachel for asking me to launch her book. We in the Irish Garden have always tried to encourage people to begin gardening. Somebody asked me there earlier tonight about how would you start off, and I said start small. Start small and put the dirty end of the plant in the ground. You're 90% there then. But having said that, we also felt it was useful and important to have a section that would be written by a beginner, because then we felt that people might identify with it more easily. So Rachel wasn't the first beginner. The first beginner was Sandra O'Hagan down in Cork. And Sandra got so good after 10 years she opened her own nursery. So we had to get rid of her, she was no longer a beginner. So then Rachel came on board, and Christmas Eve, you tell me. I don't remember that one, because I still work on Christmas Eve. But Rachel in those days was a beginner, but a beginner with a difference, a beginner with, well, maybe not such a huge difference, because a lot of beginners are very enthusiastic, but she was full of enthusiasm and full of curiosity. And those are two very powerful weapons when it comes to anything in life, but certainly when it comes to learning about gardening. So she took on writing a column for the Irish Garden magazine, and many years later she has turned it into this book, after many years, during which time she moved from being a beginner, a self-confessed beginner, to somebody with great expertise and great knowledge. And it just goes to show that there's no better knowledge than by doing it yourself. And anybody who's ever learned about anything, if you learn by doing, it's the best way of learning by all. So I just picked out a few bits, because apart from being a beginner at the beginning and being full of enthusiasm and curiosity, Rachel also had her own style, her own voice as a writer, which is also very important. And I just picked out a few little pieces here and there, and I just quote them to you briefly. I had seen a gardening programme which advocated stacking cut sods, grassy side down. The idea is to leave them for 6 months and then avail of the beautiful topsoil produced once the grass is rotted away. This was never as simple as it sounded. Sods never stacked very well for me, and docks and scotch grass tended to permeate my beautiful topsoil. And everybody who's ever tried stacking sods will know exactly what she's talking about. I've always been enticed by the notion of seed swapping. The idea is to collect seed in autumn from your own garden and then swap your excess with other people. An extension of this idea could be to swap unused shop bought seeds. The idea, though simple, is immense fun, entirely appropriate in these times of belt tightening. So also her writing is practical, based on her own experience. But the thing that really bugs me about aphids is how opportunistic they are. I've had houseplants in winter when no windows were ever opened, and when I didn't water for a few days, hey presto, aphids, where do they come from? Are the little blighters dormant and in waiting for the plant's defences to be low? Or is the truth that they're actually in league with the dark forces of the garden? So you're not only getting plants, you're getting dark forces as well. It is small wonder that in the drabness of winter we yearn for all that is bright and beautiful. the subtlety of fresh green shoots emerging among pastel primroses is all very nice, but often in the throes of winter our hearts cry out for a proper slap-in-the-face antidote to winter's monochrome. Enter the tulip. And these are just little random quotes, but I think you can get an idea when I say that Rachel has a style of writing. There is no greater pleasure than to welcome gardening friends to the garden. They come with bags of enthusiasm and encouragement and hopefully leave with a happier heart. Opening the garden to the public is a worthwhile enterprise, but it can get very hectic. The garden must be in mint condition, edged, clipped and weeded within an inch of its life before it can be open to strangers. So that's coming towards the end of the book, because at that stage Rachel had not only graduated from being a beginner to becoming a very knowledgeable gardener, but now was moving on to the stage of opening the garden to the public, which is a very daunting prospect. And one person who opened their garden to the public likened it to showing people into your bedroom. Because the garden is a very personal place, and gardens very rarely see much time beyond the original creator. And if they do have a second life, very often it's because the second creator of the second life took on the garden in their own way and maybe made changes. And you'll find out about things as well that are not necessarily gardening, such as yarn bombing. It is thought that the yarn bombing movement started in Texas in the 90s when a group of knitters looked for innovative ways to use up their leftover wool. While we don't tend to look on knitters as cutting edge or even particularly fun, the Texans proved the world wrong by sewing knitted cozies around public sculpture and objects. So those are just a few little snippets, if you like, from Rachel's book. It's full of little allusions and stories and mentions of plants. There's an index with 8 pages in it, and in my estimate there's close to 400 plants mentioned in the index. So if you want to look up a plant and see what she has to say about a particular plant, it's easy to do by going to the index and then going back to the book itself. Or you could read each of the entries for the different months just on its own. It's about the right length for a bowl of cornflakes. And then you can have more cornflakes the following day with more writing to go with it. It's a great achievement, Rachel, and we were pleased to have you doing your beginner's diary after you're no longer a beginner. You are, of course, writing about greenhouse now, which is great to have. And because you developed tremendous interest in greenhouse and greenhouse plants, and you have particular expertise in that area. It's an interesting book. It's well written. It's well illustrated as well by Rachel's daughter, Ishtar, which is very nice. It captures the shape and the gimp and the mammy as well, which I think is very good. And I fully recommend it to you. Thank you very much. I have no more to say.
I thought I might do a brief reading over a bowl of cornflakes of just a chapter of the book, just to give a flavour of it to anybody who doesn't know it already. So that's what I'll do now, and then we have a drop to drink. Okay, so I won't sit down, because Jerry didn't sit down, so. Okay, and I think I'm going to read this one here. It's called Game Review, and I'm reading this with Liam Ascot in mind, because it's for the younger people in the audience. I'm going to know exactly what I'm talking about here. Everybody else, bear with me. Okay. As the date for my garden open day approached this August, it was all hands on deck, Dwensa. Even my eldest two were drafted in to help with weeding. Working nearby, I overheard much of their conversation as they tried to break the monotony of weeding the bank. To pass the time, a review on the weeding process, comparable to that of a computer game review, began to emerge and make us all laugh. So, with tongue-in-cheek and in an attempt to portray gardening in a language that teenagers will understand, here is a review of the weeding game. The initial impression was that the weeding game must be an arcade-style game. With arcade games, you pump your money into the slot and get thrown into the action straight away. This is what happens with the weeding game. My kids were given gloves and trowels and told to eliminate all signs of life on the bank. On the positive, it was noted that the weeding game did not come with elaborate tutorial and instructions were brief. They were brief, specific and easy to understand. On the negative, it was noted that the game had a pretty non-existent storyline. But there was one aspect of the weeding game which was deemed excellent: the graphics. My son noted that he could focus on the smallest details of any part of the weeding environment without encountering any weak rendering. Weak rendering would be quite common in computer games, especially when the part of the environment under scrutiny is not central to the plot. Non-central objects sometimes appear fuzzy. However, this was not at all the case with the weeding game, and the minutiae of the individual weeds or any part of the terrain had flawless resolution. My son put this, coupled with the startling physics, down to an excellent gaming engine known as Terra. However, despite the excellent graphics and powerful gaming engine, my kids were somewhat disappointed with the lack of activity and reward system at play. They thought that there should have been some built-in means of acquiring better tools to complete the task, e.g. thicker gardening gloves or a stronger trowel. The game was lacking in this respect, and players continued with the same inventory all the way through. In addition, while most games have difficulty curves, starting at 0 and progressively mounting to culminate in a boss fight, the weeding game brought you in halfway up the learning curve, where you remained indefinitely. In conclusion, and after a hard day's work, my kids reported that although the weeding game had excellent graphics and required minimal loading time, there was so much more that could have been achieved with just a little more imagination and forethought. I guess next time I should let them in on the gardening master plan. And that's just one of the chapters from the book, and I hope you like it.